Hello and welcome back to Bookish. It's an exciting day for me. I've been looking forward to this for a while and been trying to work out my exactly what I wanted to do, but it's almost Victober and I can't believe I'm saying that I'm excited about reading Victorian literature in the month of October, but I've been thinking about this since it was since the Victober announcement came out from the four ladies hosting the reading, and I've been really thinking hard about my TBR, and I'm finally ready to announce my TBR. And it may be an overly ambitious TBR for Victober, but like I said, I'm kind of fired up. There were 5 challenges this Victober, one for each of the ladies who's hosting Victober. So the first challenge comes from Ange at Beyond the Pages, and her challenge was to read a book by one of the host's favorite Victorian authors, and that was either Charlotte Brontë, Charles Dickens, Elizabeth Gaskell, or Thomas Hardy. I'm going to be reading an audiobook of Bleak House by Charles Dickens, and I'd already started this a while back and had kind of like given up on it. I got back into it recently, and I'm about maybe a fourth of the way through, so I figure if I churn out a few chapters every day, I can get through Bleak House, and that'll be my book that satisfies reading a book by one of the host's favorite authors, because I believe Katie's favorite Victorian author is Charles Dickens. So I'm going to read Bleak House. Kate's challenge, Kate Howe, that's her channel. Kate's challenge was to read a Victorian book with a proper noun in the title, and I really like this challenge because you kind of have to work to find a Victorian novel without a proper noun in the challenge in the title. So I'm going to go with Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. I've never read anything by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I believe I asked Katie on her channel a while back where to start, and I'm not sure that I'm starting where she started. I have to be honest with you, I went to used bookshops to try to find my Victober books, but I found Cranford, and I know a lot of people talk about Cranford, so I was kind of excited about that. So I'll be reading Cranford. That's my Victorian novel with a proper noun in the name. Challenge number 3 is Katie's challenge to read a book from the first 10 years of the Victorian period and or a book from the last 10 years of the Victorian period. Well, I didn't plan very carefully when I set out to buy my Victober books, and I kind of missed it, but I'm just going to cheat the system just a little bit. I'm going to read The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall. Now, technically, The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall was published in 1848, which is 1 year after that 10-year window, I think, at the beginning of the Victorian era. But I figure Anne Brontë was writing it in 1847, so I should be able to count it. But this is going to be hopefully the book that I use to qualify for that reading a book in the first 10 years of the Victorian period is The Tenant of Wildfeld Hall by Anne Brontë. I've never read anything by Anne Brontë, and I have to be honest with you, my apologies, Lucy, I've never really enjoyed Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights very much, so I thought maybe Anne is my Brontë author, and so I was going to give that a try. So the 4th challenge was Lucy's challenge, Lucy from Lucy the Reader, and her challenge was to read a Victorian book written by a woman anonymously or under a pseudonym. So I went George Eliot here, and I picked Silas Marner by George Eliot. There are a lot bigger George Eliot books, which I'm more or less intentionally avoiding. You know, making my Victober TBR, I was trying to be practical and realistic about how many books I could actually read. And so I kind of went with short books in lots of places. And so Silas Marner by George Eliot, that is my book by a woman who wrote under a pseudonym. And we'll see how that goes. So the 5th challenge was to read a Victorian book and watch a screen adaptation of this. I originally was not going to do this challenge, and then I remembered, and I can't believe I forgot this, I love A Christmas Carol. I love that story. Now, I've never actually read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I don't even own a copy of it, but I've watched, I think, almost every version of A Christmas Carol that's been made for the screen, whether it was for television or for the movies. I've seen the Jim Carrey animated one, which is a little silly, but I like. The only musical I actually like is Scrooge, with Albert Finney in the lead role. He's actually my favorite Scrooge in a weird way, and it has my favorite Ghost of Christmas Present in it, who also, by the way, is my favorite ghost. Anyway, I've watched all these movie adaptations of A Christmas Carol without actually ever reading the book itself. So I thought, hey, this is perfect. I'll read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, and then I will probably rewatch several versions of A Christmas Carol during Victober, because I just really love that story of redemption and of change and a person's ability to do that. I really like that. One of the things Victober has highlighted for me are the gaps in my education, and so there are a lot of Victorian authors who I read in high school or college and almost instantly disliked. And again, I'm afraid the Brontë sisters fall into that category, and I'm going to try to give that another shot. But in addition to that, I really did not like the 2 Thomas Hardy novels I was assigned to read, Return of the Native and Jude the Obscure. I kind of lied about having read Jude the Obscure in college and wrote a paper about it anyway, because I just couldn't make myself get through it. So I was going to make sure I read a Thomas Hardy novel for Victober, and originally that was going to be the novel I read, to fulfill the challenge of reading a book by one of the host's favorite Victorian authors. But I just couldn't pull the trigger. The psychological damage done by Return of the Native and Jude the Obscure in my younger days was too great for me. But I am going to read some Thomas Hardy. I own a copy of the Oxford Anthology of English Poetry, and of course that has poetry by Thomas Hardy in it. And I'm at least going to read some poems by Thomas Hardy. Perhaps this will give me a greater appreciation for Thomas Hardy's works, and I can start reading some Thomas Hardy novels. I was feeling just a little bit like I was out of my element with this with all this Victorian literature, and I decided I had to kind of dude bro it up a little bit, and so I picked one, possibly 2 more dude bro Victorian novels. Both by Robert Louis Stevenson. So depending on time, I'll either read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Stevenson, or if I have enough time, I'd really like to read Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I've never read either one of those books, and I feel like I've missed something. I'm really excited about Victober and looking forward to digging into my Victober TBR. So it is subject to change. I might not have as much time as I think I'm going to have. Tentative Wildfeld Hall might take me a little bit longer than I think, and I am going to do that one first, and hopefully then gain momentum from there. But I'm really looking forward to this, and I'm looking forward to reading some authors that I've never read before, or who I have read and didn't appreciate, and really just getting into a whole area of literature that where I haven't spent enough time and haven't done enough reading. Anyway, let me know what you think about my Victober TBR down in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching.